Hi friends, happy Tuesday. Welcome back to our Read Aloud for today. Today we are going to continue hitting our learning target of identifying the main idea of the text with our theme of apples. We're going to look at a fictional text about a character whose name is Amelia Bedelia, and she is going to make her first apple pie. But even though this text is a made-up story, which is fictional, you're going to hear some facts that you already know about apples while we read this story. So keep that in your brain. Use your schema to help you make connections to this book and what you know about apples so that while we're reading, we can hit our learning target of knowing what this story is about. What's the big idea of the story and what are our supporting details that tell us that? So our story is called Amelia Bedelia's First Apple Pie. It's written by Herman Parrish and illustrated by Lynn Averill. On the front cover, you can see that we have a character who we can infer is Amelia Bedelia. And here's our title page. We see that the words are the same, Amelia Bedelia's First Apple Pie, but we see that the illustration is different than the front cover. So this gives us another picture clue as readers as to what we're going to see in this story. I see Amelia Bedelia and maybe her mom or grandma in the kitchen holding apples. So let's see what the story's all about. Here's where our story begins. Amelia Bedelia was visiting her grandparents. It was a glorious autumn afternoon, the perfect day to rake leaves into piles and run around the yard. This word autumn, does anybody know what another word for that is? It says autumn afternoon. Another word for autumn is fall. So they're saying that it's a fall afternoon. Fall is in the air, said Granddad. Granddad and Amelia Bedelia looked up. So are the birds, said Amelia Bedelia. V-W, what are they trying to spell? Look at the birds in the sky and the shape of those letters. Just then, Amelia Bedelia's grandma came outside. Quick, said Granddad. Look busy. But it was too late. Hey, lazy bones, Grandma said jokingly. If you're just going to stand around, I've got a job for you. What do you need? Granddad asked. Apples, said Grandma. I made pie dough. If you'll get some apples, I can teach Amelia Bedelia how to bake an apple pie. Grandma's apple pie was Amelia Bedelia's favorite. Hooray, she yelled. Race you to the car. She started to run, but tripped over a branch and landed right into the pile of leaves. Whoosh! How was your trip? Asked Granddad as he helped her up. Fun, she said. Fall is in the air, and on the ground, too. Granddad smiled and said, watch your step. This word whoosh right here is an action word. We call those words onomatopoeia words. Can you say that word with me? Onomatopoeia. Very good. Amelia Bedelia tried to watch her steps, but it made her dizzy to look down at her feet all the time. Amelia Bedelia and Granddad were already in the car when Granddad yelled out, Be sure to pick Granny Smith. Who's Granny Smith? Is she helping us make the pie? Amelia Bedelia asked. You bet, Granddad said. We couldn't do it without her. Now, if you know in your apple schema about the different kinds of apples, you may know that Granny Smith is not a person, but a type of apple. So let's keep reading and see. Amelia Bedelia takes things, what we say, literally. Amelia Bedelia and Granddad drove out into the country. Your supermarket's far away, said Amelia Bedelia. We aren't going to the supermarket, said Granddad. We'll get our apples at the farmer's market. What? Asked Amelia Bedelia. Do we need to buy a farmer? No, said Granddad, laughing. Their apples are just much fresher. Why do you think their apples are much fresher at a farmer's market where they have little stands outside versus at a grocery store? Probably because we know the farmers harvest the apples, so they freshly pick them from the tree. Apples are good for me, right? Asked Amelia Bedelia. Oh, yes, said Granddad. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. They're good for your teeth, too. Folks call them nature's toothbrush. Hey, Granddad, said Amelia Bedelia, if I eat an apple a day, I won't have to go to the doctor or dentist ever again. Granddad smiled. I wish it worked that way, Pumpkin, he said. Granddad picked up a bright green apple, polished it on his jacket, and tossed it to Amelia Bedelia. Nice catch, he said. Meet Granny Smith. Amelia Bedelia took a loud, crunchy bite. Granny's yummy, she said. So we said Granny Smith is what they're going to get. What color apple is Granny Smith apple? Green. Good job. Bushel baskets overflowed with red, yellow, orange, pink, and green apples. Some apples wore stripes or spots or splotches. The colors reminded Amelia Bedelia of autumn, or fall. While Granddad chose apples to buy, Amelia Bedelia read the names out loud. One kind was called Delicious, but they all looked tasty to her. So there's all different apples on this page with the tags next to it of what they called the apples. When they got home, Grandma went right to work, coring and peeling the apples. Amelia Bedelia measured the peels to see which one was the longest. When they say peeling, look what Granny's doing over here. She's taking the core or the skin off of the apple, and Amelia Bedelia is seeing how long the skin is. Grandma cut each apple into 2 pieces, then into 4, and then into 8. Finally, she sprinkled sugar and cinnamon on the slices. Next, Grandma pulled out all of her pie pans, hunting for just the right one. Amelia Bedelia found a tiny pan. Is this a toy? She asked. Oh, no, said Grandma. That is a real pie pan. It's just really small. Aha! Here's the one I want. Now please get me a little flour, Sugar Plum. So as a reader now, I'm thinking, okay, she's already gone to get the apples. She's going to help her grandma make pie. They've already cored it and cut the apples. Now I'm thinking about what they're going to do next. Amelia Bedelia spied a small flower in the windowsill and picked it. Here you go, Grandma, she said. Thanks, sweetie, said Grandma. Then she showed Amelia Bedelia where she kept the flour she used for baking. So when Grandma says she needed flour for baking, did she mean an actual flour like the one Amelia Bedelia had? Or baking flour? Flour for baking. Good. Amelia Bedelia takes things so literally. She, in her brain, thinks, oh, she means flour? Oh, I got you one. Grandma rolled out the dough. It got flatter and thinner. It got rounder and bigger. Grandma said, careful, watch your fingers. Amelia Bedelia took her hands off the table. She watched her fingers very carefully. They looked pretty boring. She wondered why she had to do this to make an apple pie. Does she really need to watch her fingers? No, what did Grandma mean by that? She meant move her fingers so that they don't get squished. Now, we need a sprinkle of flour, said Grandma. Amelia Bedelia reached into the sack of flour, grabbed a handful, and sprinkled it all over their heads. Grandma laughed. Not on us, she said, on the dough. Amelia Bedelia sprinkled some on the dough, too. At last, said Grandma, we're ready to put the pie together. And that's exactly what Grandma and Amelia Bedelia did. Then Grandma popped the pie into the oven, set the timer, and started to clean up the kitchen. That's when Amelia Bedelia had an idea. She took the leftover dough and rolled it out into small circles. She put one in the little pie pan and filled it with extra apples and plopped the other circle on top. Then she crimped the edges all around. Crimped is what she's doing in this picture right here. A smidgen of dough was left, so she made a little flower, a tiny daisy to decorate the top. Your mom and dad will be here soon, said Grandma. Then we'll have a pie party. Yippee, said Amelia Bedelia. Granddad heard the commotion and came into the kitchen. What are we celebrating, he said. Honey, said Grandma, Amelia Bedelia made her first apple pie. After Grandma took her pie out of the oven, Amelia Bedelia carefully and secretly slid hers in. There's our little one, and here's the one that Grandma pulled out. You can see in the picture that it smells pretty good. I'm going to set this outside to cool, said Grandma. It was time to get ready for the party. Grandma hummed as she set the table. Soon, Granddad was whistling the same tune. Outside, the birds were chirping and tweeting and singing like mad. Listen, said Amelia Bedelia. It sounds like the birds are having a party too. My pie! Exclaimed Grandma. What do you think happened? Let's keep reading and see. They all ran outside. The pie was covered with birds. Scram! Hollered Grandma. Shoo, shoo! Chirp, chirp, chirp. Amelia Bedelia took off her shoe and handed it to Grandma, but it was too late. Why do you think Amelia Bedelia took her shoe off? Her grandma was yelling, shoo, shoo. When we want to get a fly or something away, sometimes we say shoo, but she thought her grandma meant take off her shoe. She needed it. Our pie, said Amelia Bedelia. Gone, said Grandma. Just then, Amelia Bedelia's parents arrived. Amelia Bedelia's dad stared at the empty pie pan. Gee, he said, couldn't wait for us. The birds ate our pie, said Amelia Bedelia. What birds? Asked her mom. I think they were swallows, said Granddad. They sure were, said Amelia Bedelia. They swallowed the whole thing. Well, sweetheart, said Amelia Bedelia's mother, let's imagine how good it would have tasted while we eat our ice cream. The whole family tried to enjoy the ice cream and not think about the pie, but that was impossible. We made the best pie, said Amelia Bedelia. It was a thing of beauty, said Grandma. It would have been delicious, said Grandpa. It was a perfect pie, said Amelia Bedelia. Her lower lip trembled. Then she let out a sob. What does that mean? That means she cried. You know, said Amelia Bedelia's father, just hearing you talk about that pie makes me think I can smell a fresh baked pie coming out of the oven. My pie! Exclaimed Amelia Bedelia. She forgot about her little pie she made. They raced to the kitchen. Grandma took the tiny pie out of the oven and set it on the table. There it was, bubbling hot and baked to perfection. They all gathered around and gazed at it as though it were a brand new baby. Look at him looking at the little pie. It's absolutely perfect, said Amelia Bedelia's mother. Just like Grandma, said Granddad. Only smaller, said Amelia Bedelia. And you made it all by yourself, said Grandma. This time, said Amelia Bedelia's father, let's let the pie cool down in the house. But no one could wait. Grandma cut tiny pieces for everyone. She took one bite and declared, This is the best apple pie I've ever tasted. Amelia Bedelia's smile was so big that it was hard for her to eat. Thank you, Grandma, she said, and thank you, Granny. Granny who? Said Amelia Bedelia's mother. Granny Smith, said Amelia Bedelia. She made all of our apples in the first place. And what color apples are those? Green. And at the very end of this story, they have more information for the reader, such as a recipe for making apple pie, for the crust, the filling, and putting it all together. So you can make a pie just like Amelia Bedelia and her grandmother. Give me 2 thumbs up if you enjoyed that story. Excellent. So now our brains are thinking about what that story is mostly about, the main idea or the big idea. And the main idea of that story is Amelia Bedelia making an apple pie with her grandparents, right? And we have some supporting details. So in this story, we learn that for the pie, they need to go to the farmer's market or store, but they go to the farmer's market for some Granny Smith apples, which are what color? Green, we learned. And they get back, and Amelia Bedelia and her grandma start making the apple pie, a big apple pie. And grandma teaches Amelia Bedelia step by step how to do it. And then Amelia Bedelia realizes what is left over for her to be able to use. Pie crust. So she uses a little bit of pie crust left over, and does grandma see her use it? No, she doesn't see that Amelia Bedelia uses that pie crust and leftover apples to make her little bitty apple pie. Then she sticks it in the oven as grandma's taking the pie out, and grandma puts the pie where? She puts it outside to cool down, right? Because it's too hot. So while it's outside cooling down, la-di-da, they hear birds chirping, and what do they discover? The birds fly in and start eating all the apple pie, right? And after that, Amelia Bedelia's mom and dad come to pick her up and stay and enjoy. Do they eat the apple pie first? No, they don't realize that there's any apple pie left, right? They think the birds ate it all. So they ate some ice cream thinking about the apple pie. And who discovers that they smell some apple pie? That's right, Amelia Bedelia's dad. He's like, we're talking about apple pie so much, I think I can smell it. Come to think of it, it really is a real pie. It's her little pie cooking in the oven or baking, right? So then at the end of the story, they get to share and eat that. And Amelia Bedelia made her first apple pie. So great story. Great job thinking about what the story is about, what the main idea is, and using supporting details to help you. Tomorrow, we'll read our next apple book and talk more about the main idea and training our brains to understand apples. All right, see you tomorrow.